In this tutorial, we're going to begin to add pickups to our game. Now, in this game, we want to have quite a number of pickups. So there's two ways we could go about this. We could either create 20 or 30 individual pickups with their own variables in it. And that could make our code base really big and complicated to keep track of. Or we can create like a prototype of a pickup and just have a list and keep track of the list. And that will make our code smaller, a little bit more complicated, but generally a lot easier for us to manage. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a class or a type of thing called a pickup, and we're just going to have a list and keep track of the list. So how are we going to do this? Well, first of all, we need to we're going to make it into a new file, just to keep things easier to manage. So we're going to create a new file, and we're going to save this as pickup.js. Now we need to be able to access this code. So we need to go to index.html and then we need to include it as a script. So under game.js, I'm going to put in pickup.js. That's this new file. It doesn't contain anything in it yet, but later on it will. Now, our pickup's going to need to have a physical form. It's going to have an image associated with it. Now to load images, I'm going to have to load that in game.js. So that's what I'm going to do first. Under my tiled map, I'm going to create a variable called pickup image. And initially that's not going to be equal to anything. But down here, after I've created my tiled map in preload, that's where I will load that image up. So pickup image is going to equal load image, and the image it is going to load is under my images folder, and it's called coin.png. Okay, so my image is loaded into my game. Right. So now that that's dealt with, I'm going to go and create this prototype of a pickup. Now the way you create like a prototype or virtual object is called a class called pickup. It's a class of objects, like a vehicle or a car. It's going to have certain qualities to it. Now to create our pickup, it's going to need to be constructed virtually. So it's going to need a constructor. Now this constructor, when we create this pickup, it's going to need to be given some information. The information this pickup or this coin needs to know is, where am I? It's going to need to know its x and y coordinate. So we're going to send those through in the constructor when we make it. So now we're going to add 4 lines of code. And these lines of code are going to be similar to things we've done before, because our coin is going to be just a little bit like our player. It's going to be a sprite. It's going to have a collider. So first of all, this dot sprite equals create sprite at the location xy. So it's going to create a sprite on the screen at this location. Next, it's going to set the default collider. This dot sprite dot set default collider. It needs to set this property in order to be able to make it detect collisions with other things. Now we need to add an image to this. So this dot sprite dot add image, and the image we're going to add is pickup image. This is the image that we loaded over here earlier. So now our pickup is a sprite, it has a collider and it has an image. We're going to add one more property to it, because sprites can interact with each other in different ways. They can either bounce off each other and have one fixed so it doesn't move, or they can bounce and hit each other and move each other like billiard balls. So we're going to make this sprite immovable. This dot sprite dot immovable equals true. We don't want the coin to move when we hit it. Now this coin, it needs be able to do two other things in its existence. The first thing it needs to do is be able to show itself or display itself to the world. So it needs another method called show. Now methods are pretty much the same as functions, except because they're in classes they're called methods. So when it shows, what it's going to do is draw sprite, this dot sprite. Now we've seen that line before. When we made our player draw on the screen, it did draw sprite. We're just running the same code here. The pickups, or the coin, the pickup, is going to draw itself. Now the last thing each of these pickups is going to need to do is check if it has hit something, if it's hit the player. So we're going to go check hit with the player. Now how do we check for a collision if these two things are touching each other? If this dot sprite dot collide with the player, and that will return true or false. If it returns true, so that means our player and our sprite are touching each other. So the player is picking up the coin. We want the coin to disappear. So this dot sprite dot remove, so get rid of itself. And then we're going to return true. We're going to tell the program that yes, the sprite has collided and we have removed it. If that doesn't happen, we will return false by default. No collision has occurred between a sprite and a player. And that is our prototype pickup. In our next tutorial, we're going to make these pickups generate, and then we're going to make them display on the screen.